A veteran officer smirked at what he thought was just another inexperienced law student. He had no clue he was staring at the attorney who would dismantle his entire career in front of a packed courtroom. Nobody took him seriously the moment he stepped through those heavy oak doors. Not the bailiff who barely glanced up from his paperwork. Not the scattered observers in the gallery whispering about, "Bring your kid to work day." And definitely not Officer Marcus Webb, who was already slouched in the witness chair like this. Was just another Tuesday afternoon in his 25-year career of collecting easy paychecks. But Marcus Rivera didn't care what they thought. He pushed through the courtroom entrance at exactly 9:02 a.m., his worn leather messenger bag slung across his shoulder and a thermos of coffee in his free hand. He wasn't early to impress anyone. He was strategic, just enough time to settle, and without looking rushed, but late enough to make sure everyone noticed when he walked in. Faded black jeans, a crisp white button-down with sleeves rolled to his forearms, and a navy sport coat that had seen better days but still fit perfectly. His dark hair was styled neat but not overdone, and at 20 years old he carried himself like someone who'd learned early that respect wasn't given. It was earned, one case at a time. He carried no flashy briefcase, no stack of legal pads, just that messenger bag and a confidence that seemed to radiate from somewhere deeper than his years should have allowed. "All rise. Court is now in session," the bailiff announced as Judge Patricia Hendricks, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, took the bench with the kind of authority that came from 2 decades of seeing every trick in the book. Marcus slid into high. His seat at the defense table without fanfare, pulled out a single thick folder, and opened it to a tab marked Webb Cross-Examination. The prosecuting attorney, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, glanced over with barely concealed confusion. "Excuse me, son, but this table is reserved for licensed attorneys," he said, his tone condescending enough to make several people. The gallery turned their heads. Marcus looked up, his dark eyes calm and focused. No attitude, no defensiveness, just facts. "I am licensed counsel." A pause. The prosecutor blinked twice. You're handling the cross-examination today?" "That's correct." The man studied Marcus's face, trying to decide if this was some kind of elaborate prank or if he should be concerned. Before he could respond, a loud snort came from the witness stand. "This is some kind of joke, right?" Officer Webb's voice cut through the courtroom's murmur. He was the type of cop who still wore his aviator sunglasses indoors and referred to traffic stops as hunting season. His arms were crossed, a smug grin spreading across his weathered face as he addressed the court officer beside him. "What's next? They gonna let him bring his mommy to help with the big words?" A few chuckles rippled through the benches. Marcus didn't even flinch. He clicked his pen once, made a single note in his folder, and waited. Judge Hendricks raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Rivera, I assume you're prepared to proceed." Marcus stood, his voice steady and professional. "Yes, Your Honor. Defense is ready to begin cross-examination." Officer Webb leaned back in his chair, still grinning, but something in his eyes shifted slightly. Maybe it was the way Marcus carried himself, or maybe it was the fact that this kid wasn't backing down. Either way, the smirk stayed, but the confidence behind it flickered just a little. Marcus approached the witness stand with measured steps. Not aggressive, not timid, just purposeful, like a surgeon approaching an operating table. "Officer Webb," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the courtroom. "You've been with the Dallas Police Department for how long?" Webb straightened up slightly, puffing out his chest. 25 years, son. Been doing this since before you were born." "Perfect," Marcus replied, consulting his notes. "So you're well-versed in departmental protocols for traffic stops, correct?" "Obviously." "Good. I'd like to walk through a specific incident with you. The traffic stop involving my client on March 18th at approximately 2:30 p.m. The courtroom's energy shifted. People stopped scrolling their phones. Even the court reporter looked up from her machine. Webb rolled his shoulders like he was warming, up for a workout. "You mean the guy who blew through a red light and got all hostile when I pulled him over?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Yes, The man you stopped at the intersection of Commerce and Bishop. The same man you described in your report, as agitated and displaying suspicious behavior consistent with narcotics use. That's right. Marcus stopped walking and locked eyes with Webb. Was your body camera activated during this stop? Course it was, department policy. And was that footage submitted with your report? Yep. Marcus turned to address Judge Hendricks. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'll be referencing the officer's own body camera footage throughout my questioning. Judge Hendricks nodded. Proceed, counselor. Webb shifted in his seat, but he wasn't uncomfortable yet. Not quite. He still thought this would be over in 10 minutes, maybe 15 if the kid wanted to show off for his girlfriend in the gallery. But something about the way Marcus flipped to the next section of his folder made the entire courtroom lean forward in their seats. And Officer Webb was about to learn that being underestimated could be the most dangerous thing that ever happened to him. The courtroom wasn't full, but every seat felt occupied now. Phones were tucked away. The prosecutor's confident slouch had transformed into rigid attention. Even Judge Hendricks leaned forward slightly, her decades of experience telling her something interesting was about to unfold. Marcus stood at the podium, his folder open but his eyes focused entirely on Officer Webb. Officer Webb, according to your incident report, you observed my client run a red light at the intersection of Commerce and Bishop. Do you recall writing that? I do. And you were positioned in your patrol car facing north on Bishop Street. When you witnessed this alleged violation? Correct. Marcus nodded, making a brief note. You also stated that traffic was light, visibility was clear, and you had an unobstructed view of the intersection. Is that accurate? That's what I wrote. Yeah, Marcus walked to his table and picked up a photograph. This is a still image from your body camera, time-stamped at 2:29:47 p.m. It shows your vehicle's position and the intersection in question. He held up the photo. Officer Webb, can you identify the large delivery truck parked directly in front of the traffic signal, partially blocking the view of eastbound traffic? Webb squinted at the image. His confident posture faltered slightly. Well, there might have been a truck there, but... Not might have been, Marcus interrupted gently. There was. And from your position behind this truck, could you clearly observe whether my client's vehicle came to a complete stop before proceeding through the intersection? I could see enough to make the call. That's not what I asked, Officer Webb. Could you clearly observe it? Webb's jaw tightened. Not completely clear, no. Thank you. Marcus set the photo aside. Let's move to the audio portion of your body camera footage. At timestamp 2:32:115, your exact words were, and I quote, "This one's tweaking. Probably got something on him." Is that correct? Yeah, that's what I said. Did you conduct any field sobriety tests on my client? No. Any drug recognition evaluations? No. Did you request backup for a suspected narcotics violation? Didn't. Need to. Marcus paused, letting the silence stretch. So your assessment that my client was tweaking and probably had something on him was based on what specific observations? Webb shifted uncomfortably. The way he was acting. Nervous, jumpy, kept looking around. Did my client raise his voice during the interaction? No. Did he refuse to comply with any of your requests? No. Did he make any threatening gestures or statements? No. Marcus walked closer to the witness stand. So your professional opinion that he was under the influence of narcotics was based solely on the fact that he appeared nervous during a police stop? Look, I've been doing this for 25 years. You develop instincts. Instincts, Marcus repeated. Let's talk about those instincts, Officer Webb. Your report states that you observed a suspicious bulge in my client's jacket pocket and suspected a weapon. That's right. But the body camera footage shows you never asked him to remove his hands from his pockets, never asked about the object, and never conducted a pat-down search. How did you determine it was suspicious? Webb's face reddened slightly. It could have been anything. Could have been. But you wrote definitively that you observed a suspicious bulge that warranted investigation. Which was it? Could have been, or definitely was? Maybe I was being thorough in my report. Or maybe you were being creative, Marcus said, his tone still perfectly level. The courtroom was dead silent. Even the court reporter seemed to be holding her breath. Marcus returned to his table and pulled out another document. Officer Webb, in your 25 years of service, have you ever been the subject of internal investigation? The prosecutor started to object, but Judge Hendricks waved him off. Answer the question, officer. Webb's hands gripped the arms of his chair. Yes, twice. What were the nature of those investigations? One was excessive force, the other was conduct unbecoming. And the outcomes? Both were resolved internally. Marcus nodded slowly. Resolved, not dismissed, not unfounded. Resolved. He walked back toward the witness stand, and for the first time, Officer Webb looked like a man who realized he might be in over his head. Officer Webb, let me read you something from the Dallas PD Procedural Manual, Section 4.7. Officers shall not initiate stops based on subjective interpretations of lawful behavior. All enforcement actions must be supported by clear, articulable violations of law. Marcus lowered the manual. You stopped my client based on a traffic violation you admittedly couldn't clearly observe, searched him based on instincts about his behavior, and wrote a report describing evidence you never actually identified. Is that correct? Is that correct, Officer Webb? Webb's confident smirk was completely gone now. His knee bounced under the witness stand. A nervous tic he probably didn't even realize he was displaying. I followed proper procedure, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Marcus pulled out his final document. I'd like to reference case file DPD 2847 from 8 months ago. Another traffic stop you conducted. Same neighborhood. The report uses remarkably similar language. Subject appeared agitated and displayed suspicious behavior consistent with narcotics use. Webb said nothing. The individual in that case was also a young black man driving alone in the afternoon. Also searched, also cited, also later had charges dismissed due to lack of evidence. Are you seeing a pattern here, Officer Webb? I don't profile people, Webb said, but his voice was barely above a whisper. I'm not saying you do, Marcus replied. I'm saying your report suggests you rely on assumptions rather than evidence, and those assumptions seem to follow a very specific demographic profile. He walked back to his table and sat down. Officer Webb, did you know my client is a pediatric nurse at Children's Medical Center? Webb's head snapped up. No. Did you ask him what he did for work? No. Where he was coming from that afternoon? No. Where he was going? No. Marcus leaned forward slightly. So you saw a young black man in a hoodie driving an older model Honda and wrote his entire story for him. You decided he was a criminal before you even approached his vehicle. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. You didn't ask questions because you thought you already had the answers. You didn't need evidence because you had your instincts. And you didn't think anyone would challenge your report because, in 25 years, probably no one ever has, Drickus. Stood up one final time. Officer Webb, what scares me most isn't that you made assumptions about my client. It's how comfortable you were making them, and how confident you were that no one would hold you accountable for turning those assumptions into official police action. Judge Hendricks cleared her throat. Mr. Rivera, do you have any further questions? No. Your Honor, I think Officer Webb has told us everything we need to know. Webb stared at Marcus with a mixture of shock and something that might have been respect. The smirk was gone, replaced by the uncomfortable realization that he'd just been systematically dismantled by someone half his age, using nothing but his own words and departmental policies. As Marcus gathered his papers, the prosecutor requested redirect examination, but it was clear his heart wasn't in it. After a few half-hearted questions that only reinforced Marcus's points, Judge Hendricks called for closing arguments, but everyone in that courtroom already knew the real closing had just happened. Marcus hadn't just defended his client. He'd exposed a system that allowed officers like Webb to operate with impunity, using nothing more than preparation, policy, and the defendant's own documented words. The gallery buzzed with quiet conversations as people processed what they'd just witnessed. This wasn't the dramatic courtroom theater they'd seen on TV. This was something more powerful, methodical, intelligent, and absolutely devastating. And Officer Webb sat in the witness chair, finally understanding that the young man he'd mocked wasn't just another attorney. He was the attorney who'd just ended his career. Marcus's closing argument wasn't about fireworks or dramatic gestures. It was about precision, delivered with the same calm confidence he'd maintained throughout the cross-examination. He stood slowly, adjusted his sport coat, and addressed the jury with the kind of presence that made everyone in the room lean in. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "when you watch Officer Webb's body camera footage, you don't see a criminal. You see a pediatric nurse driving home from a 12-hour shift at Children's Medical Center. You see a man who cooperated fully with every request. You see someone who was polite, compliant, and completely innocent of any wrongdoing." He paused, letting that image settle in their minds. "What you also see is an officer who made critical decisions based not on evidence, but on assumptions, not on policy, but on profiling, not on what he observed, but on what he expected to find." Marcus walked toward the jury box, his voice gaining strength without becoming aggressive. Officer Webb admitted he couldn't clearly see the alleged traffic violation. He admitted he had no evidence of drug use. He admitted he never identified the suspicious bulge he wrote about in his report. Yet he stopped, searched, and cited my client anyway. He turned slightly, glancing at Officer Webb before returning his attention to the jury. "This case isn't about whether police officers should do their jobs. It's about whether they should be held to the same standards of truth and accountability that govern the rest of us." Officer Webb had 25 years of experience, departmental training, and clear policies to guide his actions. Instead, he chose to rely on stereotypes and assumptions. Marcus walked back toward his table, his voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. "My client, Jerome Washington, spent 6 hours in processing, missed his shift at the hospital, and faced potential criminal charges because an officer decided his story based on his appearance. That's not law enforcement. That's prejudice with a badge." He faced the jury one final time. "I'm not asking you to be angry. I'm asking you to be honest. The evidence is clear. The officer's own words condemn his actions, and the truth deserves better than creative report writing and convenient assumptions." Marcus sat down, his closing complete in under 3 minutes. No theatrical gestures, no emotional appeals, just facts delivered with surgical precision. Prosecutor's closing was longer but weaker, relying on Officer Webb's experience and the general difficulty of police work. But after what the jury had witnessed during cross-examination, it felt hollow. Deliberation took 53 minutes. When the jury returned, their foreman stood with the kind of solemn expression that told the whole story before he spoke. "We find the defendant not guilty on all charges." The courtroom erupted in quiet celebration. Jerome Washington, a tall, soft-spoken man in his 30s, turned to Marcus with tears in his eyes. "I thought this was going to destroy everything," he whispered. "My job, my reputation, everything." Marcus shook his hand firmly. "You're still here. That means we won." As people filed out of the courtroom, Officer Webb remained seated, staring at his hands. 25 years of assuming no one would question his methods had just caught up with him in the most public way possible. Outside the courthouse, a small group of local reporters waited for Marcus. One stepped forward with a microphone. "Mr. Rivera, how does it feel to win such a high-profile case at your age?" Marcus adjusted his messenger bag and looked directly into the camera. "This wasn't about my age. It was about accountability. Officers like Webb have been writing reports like this for decades because they assumed no one would read them carefully enough to notice the contradictions." He paused, his expression serious but not angry. "The system works when everyone follows the rules. It fails when we make exceptions based on assumptions. Today, the rules won." As Marcus walked away, He didn't know that someone in the courtroom gallery had recorded portions of his cross-examination. By evening, clips would be circulating on social media with captions like, "20-year-old attorney destroys dirty cop," and "This is what real legal skills look like." But Marcus wasn't interested in viral fame. He was already thinking about his next case, his next client, and his next opportunity to prove that preparation and principles could triumph over prejudice and power. 3 weeks later, Officer Webb was quietly reassigned to desk duty pending a full internal investigation. The department issued a statement about reviewing procedures and reaffirming commitment to professional standards. Marcus read the statement from his small apartment near the university, shook his head and muttered, "Same script, different day." But something had changed. Young attorneys were reaching out for advice. Law students were asking about his approach. And most importantly, other Jerome Washingtons were finding the courage to fight back instead of just paying fines and accepting injustice. Marcus Rivera hadn't just won a case. He'd sent a message that echoed far beyond that courtroom. Underestimate the person with something to prove and nothing to lose, and you might just find yourself facing the consequences of your own actions. Sometimes the quietest voices carry the loudest truths. Sometimes the youngest person in the room is the only one brave enough to speak them. And sometimes justice doesn't come with fanfare. It comes with facts, preparation, and the simple refusal to accept that things have to stay the way they've always been. If this story reminds you that change is possible, share it, discuss it, use it as inspiration to challenge assumptions and demand accountability. Because silence never changed anything, but courage backed by competence can change everything.